2023 has been an absolute bombshell of a year for gaming. In a year that was otherwise pretty terrible for the industry, the quality and frequency of titles that us players got to get our hands on was truly remarkable. It felt like every other week, my social media timelines had hopped onto a new game that I suddenly needed to be playing in order to understand the lore of what everyone was talking about. So much so that it became a genuine struggle to keep up with everything. But a king never backs down. And in a year with so many titles dropping, it just begs the question, which ones were the best? To start us off, a game that I have routinely forgot to put in these year-end wrap-up videos, which is strange, because I have basically never stopped playing Hades since the second it came out. Hades is what happens when you take a game format that everybody loves, the progression of your average room-based roguelike, and execute it perfectly. The core gameplay loop is addictive. Each weapon and power-up from the gods feels powerful and interesting, and the art style is appropriately gothic, with the underlying story having a strong premise that explains why you're constantly running this gauntlet in-universe. The characters are all delightful to watch develop over the course of multiple playthroughs, and the ones who don't get to develop as much are silly enough caricatures that you don't really mind that they're only there to goof with you. I started this game on the hardest difficulty and got so helplessly addicted that even 155 hours into this game, I still haven't gotten the true ending. If a video has ever taken suspiciously too long to release in this channel's history, it's a safe assumption that somewhere in the production pipeline, I got caught up playing unhealthy amounts of Hades. New Super Lucky's Tale is a game that I'm not even sure how I came to want, but for as long as I can remember, it's been on my radar. It was one of those games that was constantly staring at me from my eShop wishlist, just waiting for the lucky day that I'd finally take a chance on it. And when I finally did, holy shit was I impressed. It's a very unassuming title with a whole lot of cute but very generic looking little guys and a kind of uninspired 3D platformer. But let me tell you, the appearance does this game no favors because it is a sleeper favorite of mine. It is just such a joy to play. They have the controls down to a science. The levels are interesting and throw new twists at you all the time, and the main gimmick of this burrowing dive is a whole lot of fun to mess around with in motion. I am a big fan of interesting movement mechanics in video games, and this dive is a lesson in simplicity, with it being one button that does one thing with a wealth of room for experimentation. I love this game. I purchased it on the loosest of whims and basically did not put it down until I hit 100% completion. There's something so comfortable about games that fall into the $30 to $40 price range. They're produced with a higher budget than your average indie title, but still can afford to take risks that your typical AAA game probably couldn't. This one is a good time. Dave the Diver is the supposed indie game of the year, and while I personally have issues with that title, the game's a really strong one. This is a game that at all times is trying to trap the player into a feedback loop. Go dive into the ocean and hunt fish, serve that fish in a sushi restaurant, and through all of that, learn about the people around you. And man, do I love that feedback loop. This is one of those games that throws so much at the player at any given time that it never really has the time to stagnate. You're always doing new things, meeting new people, going to new places, and doing new things for those new people in those new places. It is always throwing new content at you. And that new content never disrupts the core gameplay that got you to be playing in the first place. It's addicting, but manageable. Fun, but well-paced enough that you never find yourself throwing hours down the tubes without any meaningful progress. It's a game that guarantees every time you load it up that you are going to discover something radically different and interesting. It's not an indie game, but it's a good time. In a weaker year, I could easily see this somewhere in the top 10. ViewFinder is yet another title that had been on my radar for quite a while. It's a bit of a hard sell, focusing on the idea of taking photos, then placing the scenes from those photos into your environment. An idea that is so good that it had a decent chunk of our friends barfing from motion sickness when we played the demo. And this game has become an even harder sell thanks to a viral Twitter clip of Vinny Vinesauce muting the game's voice acting. but I don't know, I really like this one. Like, I could see why people wouldn't like the voice acting, but it's not very prevalent, and the weaknesses one could find from that writing style are easily made up for by the pure, unhinged creativity on display from the gameplay. The photo gimmick is an astounding one. The game is at its best when it drops a random ass picture in front of you, and you have to figure out how the hell this ties into the puzzle laid out before you. And the story, well, to be completely honest, I don't think the story is half bad either. This is one of those games that you play when you have a couple friends backseating you so that you can all just enjoy the trippy fun that comes with the premise. If you had told me that one of my favorite games that I would play this year started out its life as a mobile game, I would be shocked. Because it didn't start out its life as a mobile game. I was wrong. Vampire Survivors takes the concept of an addicting mobile game and delivers to you an experience that has none of the issues of your typical addicting mobile game. All of the dopamine of clearing out hordes upon hordes of enemies and winning gacha pulls with no actual money spent. It is probably the most addicting video game I have ever played. And outside of a ridiculously strong core gameplay loop, there are so many neat little unlockables and new trinkets to discover throughout every play session. Back when I first talked about this game in October, I thought I was getting dangerously close to 100% completion. But since then, I must have unlocked like 20 new characters, a bunch of new weapons, and several match modifiers that keep the game fresh no matter what I end up doing. Seriously, this one is magic. Even more magical is the low price. Go buy it so you can join me in waiting for the Among Us DLC for whenever it decides to drop on Switch. Super Mario RPG is a piece of history that I had been missing out on for quite a while. It was one of many games that was critically revered but a blind spot for me personally, so I am so glad that Nintendo released a beautiful remake of the title just in time for me to talk about it here. The original Mario RPG came out at a time where the classic JRPG was in a renaissance of sorts, bringing fun, campy energy with a Mario twist to a genre that was dominating the scene. And in this bombshell of a year, Mario RPG still feels just as fresh as I imagine it did back in the 90s. There's such a wide breadth of characters, gameplay, and so many random white whales that you can chase in the post-game and beyond that it's no wonder that people who played this game growing up became obsessed with it. People talk about this one for a reason. Especially nowadays when we're in another sort of RPG renaissance with quirky weird RPGs being some of the most beloved year in, year out. Aside from Earthbound, this is the quintessential quirky RPG, and you can really feel the DNA of all the games that this would go on to inspire throughout every moment of its gameplay. Super Mario RPG is genuinely so good. Don't sleep on this one like I did. Resident Evil is a series of games that I usually only truly begin to love after a couple playthroughs, but that is not the case for Resident Evil 4. The remake one. I was stringently against the idea of remaking 4, given that by modern standards, Resident Evil 4 is a more controllable game than the 3 remakes that came before it. We still have titles like Code Veronica on the table, but now that I'm on the other side, fuck it, I love my time here. The Resident Evil series has always struggled to combine cartoonishly involved action, survival horror, and serious character drama into one complete package, but I think the series finds itself the best it has ever been in combining these elements in this one. Throughout the title, I was consistently scared, having fun, engaged, and invested in the characters. And nothing came at the cost of anything else, something that I think the series has really struggled with in the past. It takes a couple steps back from Age. I would have loved a more fleshed out mercenaries mode, or maybe a couple of the more silly weapons that Age received on repeat playthroughs, but even at my most hater-brained, I can't deny that this is a good package. And the DLC, Separate Ways starring Ada Wong and arguably the most iconic look of the year, is more of the same, except with a grappling hook that single-handedly improves some of the most annoying parts of the base game. Good stuff. Alright, here is the part of the video where I am going to talk about One Piece. Here's a timestamp. You can skip it if you want. Last year I talked about the video game One Piece Pirate Warriors 4. This year, I 100%ed it. Why? I don't know. I love the Warriors games. They're basically the ultimate pick up and play titles for me. It's basically guaranteed that at any given moment, I am actively playing a Musou title in the background of whatever else I'm doing. I made my way through Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity, Fire Emblem Warriors, Ultimate Alliance 3, though I gotta be honest, I'm not sure if that one counts, and Pirate Warriors 4. So now I am going back and playing Pirate Warriors 3, which is the real meat of this segment. It's a Warriors title. If you know what you're getting into, you're probably gonna love it. Lots of playable characters, lots of ways to upgrade them, lots of enemies to beat, and a lot of completable missions. For you Zelda fans in the audience, if Pirate Warriors 4 is Age of Calamity, Pirate Warriors 3 is Definitive Edition, which is to say, Pirate Warriors 4 has larger, more intricate maps and far more fleshed out movesets. But in terms of everything that isn't raw gameplay, 3 is the better game. It has a more involved story mode, a more generous spread of characters throughout One Piece's history, and it has incredible costumes. Seriously, 4 only has like 5 costumes and they're all for Luffy, but in this game it feels like every character has a good selection. If you like One Piece, I wholeheartedly recommend that you sink your time into this one. And even if you don't, fuck it. If people are watching the live action show and jumping straight into the anime, I see no reason why you couldn't just play the story mode of Pirate Warriors 3 and watch the rest of the anime from there. It may be a hot take, but at the end of the day, more One Piece fans is a net positive thing for me. And of course, no end of the year gaming recap would be complete without me talking about a couple of the ongoing live service games that I have played, because whether we like it or not, we all spend too much time on at least one live service title. We all have at least one weakness. And for me, this was a bad year for live service games. I think that we are currently witnessing the beginning of the downfall of live service games as a concept. Make of that what you will, but it feels like every title that I had been enjoying this year just dropped off the face of the earth or made a lot of questionable decisions this year. Avengers died, Multiverses temporarily died, Splatoon 3 fell off, Fortnite is being routinely mismanaged and needs to stay in its lane of Battle Royale, and for some fucking reason I'm still playing Pokemon Unite. I don't know why, but I am unbelievably hooked. It's the most greedy, money-grubbing cash grab of a video game that I have ever had the displeasure of touching, but goddamn do I love playing it. This is a game that deserves its own video, cataloging all of my more conflicting thoughts on my Stockholm Syndrome-esque relationship with it, but that's a topic for another day. For today, let's talk about the big boys. Man, despite everything, I fucking loved Mortal Kombat 1. I have a love-hate relationship with the NetherRealm Studios titles because the good is always tight and fun arcadey fighting games, but the bad is oftentimes some of the worst live service development and developer greed that I have ever seen, but when this series shines, it fucking glows. And Mortal Kombat 1, despite day one glitches out the wazoo, a lackluster single-player adventure mode, and a story that feels like the third act came from a different game, is definitely a shining moment for the studio. The pseudo-reboot nature of this game allows for more characters forgotten by Mortal Kombat past to get their time in the sun again. I personally have become a huge fan of Havoc. He's a weaker character gameplay-wise, but his visual style is so grossly engaging to watch in motion. The core gameplay of Mortal Kombat 1 harkens back to the longer combos and faster pace of my personal favorite in the series, Mortal Kombat X, which I've always felt was the strongest gameplay-wise. However, for as much as I love Mortal Kombat X and 11, these games really felt like a stagnation point for the series. A little too grimdark, a little too sci-fi over magic, and a little too up its own ass with some of the gameplay mechanics. Which is why I'm so happy that Mortal Kombat 1 feels like we've lifted off again. It's colorful, every character on the roster has different unique abilities and gimmicks, and my personal favorite character in all of Mortal Kombat, Johnny Cage, does a silly little dance when you activate his super. What else could you possibly ask for? Street Fighter 6 is probably my most played title of the year. And just like Mortal Kombat, in a summarization sense, I have more complaints than praises, but once again, just like Mortal Kombat, despite all of those complaints, I still fucking love it. I could talk all day about the lame monetization models, the underwhelming character creator, or the weird treatment of Street Fighter V leading me to distrust the ongoing service of this one, but all of my words on all of those issues will be immediately invalidated by how much time I have spent in the ranked ladder. What Street Fighter 6 excels at more than anything else is having a beautiful, varied cast and a deep, interesting visual style that makes every match as exciting to watch as it is to play. And Street Fighter 6 also gets an extra impassioned recommendation from me because it is the fighting game that gets all of my casual, non-fighting game friends wanting to play fighting games, becoming a hangout staple. And man, there's just something so special about that. This game is the greatest Street Fighter has felt in a long time, and it would be even better if they added Rainbow Mika to the game as DLC. That's not a joke, it's a demand. Do it, Capcom. Kirby's Return to Dreamland is one of my favorite games on the Wii, so it's only natural that its 2023 remake would be one of my most anticipated titles of the year. And now that I've played it, I am happy to report back and say that this game is just a better version of the original, and that's all I could have possibly asked for. With revamped visuals, a new pretty good epilogue game mode, and some of the most silly fun mini-games that the Kirby series has to offer, I enjoyed everything this game presented to me. Kirby's Return to Dreamland is, in my opinion, the pinnacle of the 2D era of the series, providing some of the most detailed movesets for all the different power-ups, a tight story with one of the most iconic villains of the series, and is somehow one of the only Kirby games that allows you to play co-op with multiple Kirbys. It's a feature that I thought was desperately missing from newer titles like Star Allies and Forgotten Land, and also a feature that got completely ignored in my playthrough of the remake because the people I played with are boring. When you lay it all out, this game is one of the most formative for the series, and you can tell. Every game released after this one for an entire console generation was piggybacking off the staples set in place by Return to Dreamland. In a year of outstanding remakes, perhaps the least flashy one ended up being my favorite, and I think that mostly just stands to the outstanding quality of the original. Alan Wake 2 is this year's sleeper hit, because it's so good, yet showed up completely out of nowhere and took me completely by surprise. I don't typically love horror games. For one, I'm a scaredy cat, but I also find a lot of them so frustrating to actually play for myself as opposed to having an internet funny man play them for me. But Alan Wake 2 provides an experience so eerily haunting that I can't help but love it. For a game that's a sequel to both a cult classic and a game that's only ever relevant to show off GPU benchmarks, Alan Wake 2 has no interest in being a sequel. I haven't played the first or Control. I know that's probably limiting some of my enjoyment here, but it's marvelous to say that I don't feel like you need to have experienced those games to enjoy the wider scope on display here. The game moves slowly, sometimes at a snail's pace, but it's all in service of letting you really breathe in this world that they have created. This game isn't scary because there's a big scary monster coming to kill you. It's more scary because you can tell something is off from the moment you show up, yet it's only ever informed to you in small, creepy doses. There's hardly any actual combat, but the potential of combat is always around the corner. So you're always dreading running into one of these shadow beasts because you have no idea which one is going to be the one that will ruin your day. Throughout all of Alan Wake's methodical, slow gameplay, you can feel the passion from the developers. Out of everything on this list, I might say that this is the best at achieving one core vision set out by the creator. It's a game that asks a lot from the player. Some of these mechanics were not my favorite thing in the world to deal with, but man oh man, does it ever deliver. This game feels like all of the best parts of a psychological thriller, and that means that I loved hating every second of this experience. Hi-Fi Rush is the game that is going to go down as the best surprise of 2023. Shadow dropping in the middle of a random day in January, we were blessed with one of the most stylistically interesting entries that we would get in the entire year. This game just oozes personality. It takes the Bayonetta route of style over substance and provides music-based hack-and-slash combat that is engaging enough that you manage to ignore how cringy the writing can be, making it the best Bayonetta game of the year. Hi-Fi Rush is the premier example of how to take a concept and really run with it. Combos that have to be in time with the backing music, charming character designs, and a visual style that seamlessly dances between 2D and 3D art with enough Ben-Day dots to make a Jour Seurat painting. Everything here is explored to its fullest potential, and it doesn't stick around long enough for any of its more negative qualities to become grating. It's just a cool 12 hours of some of the rawest hack and slash gameplay you can find in the modern era, and then you're done and on to the next thing. It knows what it is, isn't interested in being anything more, and delivers flawlessly. And you don't get games built like that too much. This one is just a chill, fun time. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is a crazy good time. For a franchise that really felt like it stagnated for the last console generation and a half, I am so glad that 2023 really turned out to be the year of Mario being weird again. And nowhere is that better felt than in the release of Mario Wonder, a game that feels like it heard the almost decades worth of Mario to Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze comparisons and decided to fight back in full force. Everyone has already emphatically talked about this game 5 times over by now, so I could talk about its super creative level designs, or its badges that make every level super interesting to replay, or the outstanding visuals that feel so different yet so right at home with the Mario franchise. But instead, I will talk about the thing that makes this game so impressive to me: how perfectly the multiplayer is handled. I love playing the older multiplayer Mario games, but it was clear that once you got more than 2 people on screen at once, that it was not meant to be played seriously. Too much going on at all times, making it almost impossible to follow. However, in Mario Wonder, the camera now only follows 1 player at a time, and when you die, you can float back and revive yourself by touching an ally. And just like that, the multiplayer is now where this game shines brightest for me. Now there is far less waiting because everyone died at the same jump, far less arguing about how to handle things, far less time spent grinding lives, and just more game. And it helps that that game is pretty incredible. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is the perfect showcase for why Nintendo is still on top all of these years deep into the Switch's lifespan. They just know how to make a fun game. And if it's not fun, then why bother? SteamWorld Build is the actual indie game of the year, and also the most recent release on my list. And weirdly enough, this is a genre I had never touched before I played it. You see, I really like the SteamWorld games. There's 6 of them now, most of them spanning completely different genres, and all of them are so fucking good that I knew, despite having no interest and knowing nothing about city builders before, I would have to be playing this one. And surprise, surprise, I found just about everything here to be a damn good time. The actual city building, even after a playthrough, still feels pretty foreign to me. People more into the genre, I imagine there's a lot more here that I barely explored, but this game is so good at firing off those little bits of dopamine that come from making everything work together as a cohesive unit. The gameplay loop of placing down worker units and then figuring out how to manufacture enough resources to keep those units happy, oftentimes requiring even more workers to do so, was a loop that had me entranced throughout the entirety of SteamWorld Build. Throw in the other half of SteamWorld Build's gameplay, which is the mining, which felt like a mix of StarCraft and Bloons Tower Defense, and you have a game that I basically couldn't bring myself to ever put down. I have an addictive personality, and as such, I easily found myself falling into hours and hours of jaw agape, brain empty city management. A serotonin loop rivaled only by the yearly 2-week Minecraft binge that everyone on the internet seemingly takes. I loved every second of this game, and I loved even more that I was able to finally finish it and return to my normal productivity workload. If you're anything like me, consider this your warning. Exercise caution when playing SteamWorld Build, or else you might lose yourself. So as we head into the top 3, I think just about everyone can guess which games are going to be in the final 2, so let me throw you for one last curveball. I've talked about this in other videos, but in 2023, I set out on a mission for myself. A mission to try new things, to go out on a limb for stuff that I normally wouldn't give 2 shits about. And through this mission, I lost 40 pounds, I was a featured guest at a convention, I became obsessed with Jasmine Kennedy, I read a whole load of new manga, and perhaps strangest of all, I fell in love with Fire Emblem Engage. much. I had never played a proper Fire Emblem title before this one, and much like a lot of other things on this list, I was kicking myself realizing that I had been skipping a franchise that I would have loved this whole time. Fire Emblem Engage's greatest strength is its ability to tell a story through its gameplay. After every turn-based strategy battle, it really feels like that I have just engaged in a strategic mind game with the opponent, with each tiny individual moment serving as a hard-fought choice on the battlefield. It really feels like every battle in this game is some kind of Tolkien epic waiting to unfold, and you, the player, are the one holding the pen. It's truly special in that way. Watching my ragtag group of royalty and their retainers tackle all the evils of this world with the help of some Fire Emblem fan favorites by their sides, taking their experiences and relationships formed on the battlefield back to our home base to explore deeper, it made me wonder why I had never even tried to play one of these before now. And the best part is, according to everyone that I have talked to about Fire Emblem Engage, this is one of the weaker games in the series. And if I loved this one this much, then it's only uphill from here. I didn't want to like Baldur's Gate 3. At first, it looked boring, as it was a standard fantasy RPG system, largely based on Dungeons & Dragons, a tabletop game that I have never played, nor do I really have any interest in playing. Or at least, that's what I thought before I gave it a shot. Actually playing Baldur's Gate 3, it's an amazingly engaging experience. I have never been a D&D guy, but one thing that my peers always bring up about the game is the freedom of it all. Since in a traditional D&D format, story, enemies, NPCs are all controlled by another player at the table, there's a huge focus on player choice and world interactivity. And these aspects of the tabletop classic are echoed masterfully in Baldur's Gate, which is crazy because this is a video game with video game restraints. It is a feat of modern game design how everything feels like it has a place in the gameplay. The most minute choices in the character creator will affect how NPCs begin to treat you going forward. Every random box or barrel in the overworld can be looted, moved around, or just straight up added to your inventory to store for later. All the characters have real, meaningful interactions, and your choices actually affect what happens to them with an absolutely insane amount of story permutations based on every single tiny choice that came before. Never before have I played a game and felt so much as if the world was my oyster. What people said about Skyrim throughout the 2010s is what people are going to be saying about Baldur's Gate 3 throughout the 2020s. If you were like me and at all hesitant to jump into Baldur's Gate for any reason, just do it. This one is going to be a cultural touchstone for decades to come. When deliberating which is the better of two games of such extreme quality, two games that really show the strengths of the medium, sometimes it just comes down to one moment. One moment that made me feel more than I felt throughout anything else I had played this year. And for me, this was that moment. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom had a lot to live up to, especially considering the meteoric success of its predecessor and longer than usual development window. But in my opinion, the game smashes through any expectations I might have had and just delivers a flawless gameplay experience. Everything in this world serves as part of a larger system. Every item can be used as a modifier to your weapons, every prop in the overworld can be interacted with to make your dream machinations. You can really do anything. Tears of the Kingdom works especially well for me because of how it handles its freedom in its puzzles, as typically I'm not really a fan of puzzles in gaming. Maybe this is a hot take, but puzzles in games for the most part are either too easy and I solve them way too quickly and am annoyed by how long it takes to actually execute the correct decision, or they are way too hard and I have to Google a solution, neither of which provide a satisfying outcome for the player. However, the open-ended gameplay of Tears of the Kingdom actively encourages you to think outside of the box. So it's less, what is the correct solution to the puzzle, and more, what can I do to solve the puzzle? Player choice is an idea that has been at the forefront of a lot of these more prevalent titles this year, and I think this is where Zelda shines best for me. This tragic epic of one man adventuring through a vast kingdom that's doing its best to hold itself together, it's a world I love, and a world that I am happy we get a second game in to really perfect that formula. There's a lot of discourse going on right now about this game and its gameplay style and where it stands with the rest of the Zelda series in context, but I don't know, I loved this one when it first dropped, and all this time later, it stays on top for me personally. What else can I say? Tears of the Kingdom is my 2023 Game of the Year. See ya!